Dorothea, perhaps you could kick us off. You all have a handheld mic there. In terms of, so we're talking about this master plan and how it lays the groundwork in a number of areas, and sustainability, of course, at its core. How great, let's start with the basics. How great is the potential, do you think, of aviation to contribute to decarbonisation? And how do you see that challenge? We've heard quite a lot about the progress made, the challenge ahead.
Thank you, Jackie, and hello, everybody. So I think we heard the figures. So I think that these 400 million tons of CO2 to be saved, or the 6% of CO2 emissions that can be avoided, are real figures. And that's, I think, where we should also congratulate SESAR JU to have made that progress, to have that master plan in place, and to have also the objectives, I think the very clearly defined objectives that we are needing to head towards. But the challenge is, of course, implementation. So I think the strategy is there, but making it happen ideally before 2045, because that is still very long out, and to make sure that we've got the right frameworks and the right incentives to invest. I think that's important, because what we've seen in the past is slipping deadlines and also investments that were not made or made way too late.
Thank you. I'd like to hear more from all of you about how you're using SESAR solutions in a moment, but to continue with that setting of the context, and from a Eurocontrol perspective, Tanja, your sense of how important ATM is to the decarbonisation. We're going to talk later about the competitiveness piece and all the other issues, but to the decarbonisation of aviation and how you see the challenge ahead. And maybe we should call it the opportunity ahead, because we tend to always focus on challenge rather than opportunity. It's on, they'll pick you up as you speak.
I would certainly agree with that. And following what Dorothea also said, we're really talking about almost 9% in terms of per flight savings that we can achieve. But if we focus on the short run, really among all the basket of measures that we can look forward in terms of decarbonization for aviation, where we also, of course, have efficiency in terms of aircrafts, but also SAF, etc., ATM is really closer. And I think I would like to focus on that for the moment. This is why we really should be keen on insisting on innovation in ATM, because it's like a low-hanging fruit. By 2035, we could really reach already the 100 tons. And by 2040, already half of what we could get by 2050. So we really should push for ATM, because we could see the results much quicker. And this is why, of course, Eurocontrol is very much present along all the single value chain, from all the innovation, participating in all the SESAR projects, or mostly all of the SESAR projects. We're really, I believe, SESAR is really a key partner for us, and we will continue doing this innovation in our Eurocontrol Innovation Hub in Bretigny. And we are, of course, very focused on how we can help to follow on to the deployment part, because I do agree that is maybe the biggest challenge that we have. But I think the new master plan, the last version of the master plan, was really focused on ensuring this smooth transition from innovation to deployment. And then, of course, in our parts, the operational part with NM. So all the single value chain should really be interconnected, so that we can really see the results of what we are doing here and the good work that SESAR is doing here. And thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much indeed. So ATM there, very much, yes, part of a bigger picture, but as you say, low-hanging fruit. So an area we really need to focus on. Want to also talk later about how it fits into that bigger context of the competitiveness of the industry, as well as the sustainability of aviation. Let's get a perspective now from Brussels Airport. Arno, great to have you with us. Thank you for having us here at the airport again. It's great to be back. Your assessment of the importance of ATM for decarbonisation and the challenge, where we are in that process.
First of all, good morning, and very pleased to have you all here today at Brussels Airport. It's a great opportunity. Obviously, you know, as said, the biggest challenge we face as an industry is CO2, obvious, and there is no magic solution. So I think every stakeholder has to take its part of this, and ATM plays a very big role. And whether it's 5%, 10% of CO2 emissions that can be, you know, eliminated through you know, ATM, that's fine. It's very important also to understand that, you know, optimizing the flight path in Europe seems an obvious thing from a layman perspective. When you talk to the man on the street, say, yes, obviously we should do it because it will reduce CO2 emissions. Obviously, technically, it's a different ball game, but that's a role that the ATMs and especially the new master plan can help achieve, is optimizing without really fundamentally negatively impacting, you know, the flight. It's just being more efficient. It's an obvious thing we need to do. It's complex, as we know. And next to that, I think ATM can also plays an important role. For instance, in green landings, and probably talk about that later on in the Heron project. You know, green landings can have a big effect on CO2 emission, but also on noise. And then finally, when you look at the current situation, the integration, the interaction between civilian airspace and military airspace is becoming more and more a topic of importance for many countries in Europe. And ATM plan is critical to optimize that as well. And that's an obvious situation we are all faced with. I think progress are being made. A number of projects are in the making, have been launched. What I see is probably one of the key challenges is the shortening of the innovation cycle. How do we accelerate things? It's fine to read that there's a plan until 2045, it's 20 years down the road. So what do we do in the next 5 years? And going back to one of your comments or questions earlier on, Jackie, is, you know, we need to make this ball rolling and probably roll faster than what it has been rolling in the past years.
Indeed, and one issue I'd like to come back to during our discussion today is the question of monitoring progress, setting interim milestones to make sure that we are on track. But we can come back on that later. Catherine, from your perspective, in terms of the potential of ATM and your assessment of that shared journey that Andreas talked about, where are we on that journey?
So we had a big pause during the pandemic, obviously, which was an issue for all of us. However, the key thing here is the play across everybody in the industry, whether you're an airport, whether you're an airline, an ANSP, a regulator, we all have to come together. Yes, when you put down on paper, our objectives are actually all mirrored. We share the objective of decarbonising the industry, but when it comes down to pounds and pence, we have very different objectives. So we're going to have to overcome this and basically create pace in deployment. My concern is I'm new to this industry from an ANSP. My background is at airports and with airlines. And we have been talking about this for a very long time now. So the point that Andreas has just made about creating that short-term plan to get things that are already in progress, and we can see a lot of it outside these doors just now, actually into the operation is going to be mission critical.
Thank you very much indeed. And indeed, we're already getting questions from the audience about that, but I'll come back to it. Complete the picture for us, Véronique, if you would, from Airbus's perspective, from a manufacturer's perspective.
Yes, thank you, Jackie. So for the aircraft manufacturer perspective, first we have all to realize that our industry, aviation industry, weighs 2.9% in terms of CO2 emissions, man-made CO2 emissions. In terms of effective radiative forcing, this is the same about the same between CO2 and non-CO2 impact. But the point about CO2 is that it lasts into the atmosphere for decades or centuries. So we have a collective duty to work on CO2 emissions. From our perspective, from the aircraft manufacturer perspective, there is a first duty that we have is to always improve our aircraft, and our latest generation aircraft are 15 or to 20% more efficient in fuel burn, which is in CO2 emission. The point is that this latest generation represents about 30% of the fleet at the moment. So there is an opportunity through the renewal of the fleet. Then the second big lever, it was mentioned already, this is with the sustainable aviation fuel. And then we have to acknowledge today that the penetration rate is not where we would like it to be. We have less than 1% of use of availability and of use of the sustainable aviation fuel. This is something that we have to collectively work on as well, to find the levers to make sure that we have the capability to produce. There are different pathways The one which is the most used is using the fat with the HEFA process. What can we do to have more SAF available in Airbus? We are trying already to use SAF for our Scope 1 emissions, and this is about 15% of SAF that we are using. All of our aircraft are capable to use 50% of SAF. We need to find the momentum to go further. And then, and I fully concur with you, there is the ATM, there is this 6% potential. It's something that it's up to us to make it happen. So let's catch together this low-hanging fruit.
Thank you very much indeed. I want to just get a sense. We've already heard that we have some 130 SESAR solutions that have been delivered. More than half have already been deployed to some extent or other. And we have a lot of other solutions in the pipeline, more than 70 research projects, those calls going out. In terms of those being implemented, we had a question from someone in our audience already saying, if there is one ATM innovation project you could make 100% implemented today without any restrictions, what would it be? My question more broadly is, what are you already doing in terms of implementing solutions? And how do you see the potential of all those others that are in the pipeline? Just to give us a real sense, I know there are a lot of projects. It'd be great if you could give examples from the projects of what you're doing. Arno, there's certainly, it's already been mentioned. Heron, you mentioned it already. A number of projects, things being deployed and in the pipeline. Give us a sense of how much difference they're already making.
Well, clearly, a number of these projects are essential for us as an airport operator. Been working on this with SESAR for a number of years. Mentioned Heron, which we are implementing together with the ATC here in Brussels Skies. Very important to reduce noise, but also the overall efficiency of the systems, especially the ISDS. So how steep can the planes land and have a steeper approach. And we already started testing this in the last quarter in 2024. You know, typically 3.0% degrees slope. Okay, now we've tested 3.2 degree. Obviously, it looks like a small difference, but it can have big impact. It's probably too early to give the results, but I can already tell you that the first analyses are quite promising, and we keep working on it. And we launch this month and in the coming, continue in the coming months, the 3.5 degree slope, and see whether this further improves the situation. So this is a very concrete example of one of the projects we are working on. Obviously, AOP is an obvious one which we all understand, and we clearly want to accelerate this. As Brussels Airport, we have been at the forefront of this investment for many years. We're now launching eAOP in the airport here with our partners. For us, a very critical thing is making sure that we have all the data we need. Together with the stakeholders in the system, we have lots of information. How do we make sure that we integrate everything so we can really approach this in terms of efficiency of our operations, to best use of our infrastructure, but also resilience in case of crisis or in case of weather conditions and so on. These are very, very important things for the whole system and also for the passengers.
Thank you very much. Catherine, from your perspective and at Heathrow Airport, I know you're also working on separation of flights, I believe it is. Pairwise, is it called?
Yes.
A project there. But in terms of what's being implemented and what's in the pipeline, and is there anything, as somebody's asked, anything that's 100% implemented already?
Yeah, so we successfully implemented Pairwise into the operation at Heathrow in December of last year. This was the upgrade from the X-Man that was delivered in 2015, so it's taken nearly 10 years for us to do that next phase of deployment, and we're about to deliver in March at Gatwick Airport arrivals management mode, which is effectively Pairwise for a single runway operation. We haven't been idle. We have helped the integration and the deployment at Schiphol Airport and at Toronto of Pairwise, which effectively produces better separation of aircraft during different weather conditions and takes into consideration the wake vortex of all of the aircraft. we only went live, as I said, in Heathrow in December. We have seen a lot of bad weather across the UK in the last 6 weeks, and actually we are already seeing the benefit of that deployment with our ability to land 1 to 2 aircraft more an hour in different weather conditions. This is huge when we think about the resilience that's needed in the system, and also in the reduction of the holding that we know is a huge contributor to CO2 emissions.
Thank you very much indeed. Dorothea, from your perspective, in terms of what you're already doing at Brussels Airlines, what you've implemented already, and whether you could highlight some of those innovations in the pipeline that you think can have a real impact. We've got quite a lot of questions about the 6%. And are we being ambitious enough with the 6%? Come back on that in a moment, but in terms of what you're actually doing.
So it's actually 2 big projects that we're working on right now. So one is obviously Heron, because Brussels Airlines, based in Brussels, needs to collaborate to work on that innovation together with Skies. And the other one is objective trajectory-based operations, which I think is also very important going forward. But where my frustration is how long it takes. So right now, it's very few flights that are eligible for testing. We're testing for the next 2 years or longer. And then maybe we would be allowed to do 100% of our flights using the Heron procedure that Arno just described. But then there's still a lot of other airlines landing in Brussels Airport, and the full potential will only happen if everybody uses it. So it takes extremely long to get it really implemented. Or the other example would be for the trajectory-based operations. We now have aircraft originally equipped from Airbus, but also that we retrofit with the equipment. But then there's hardly an ANSP in Europe where we can use it. And if you can use it for a very short stretch of your overall trajectory, it's also not very helpful. Yeah, so how can we get the frameworks to make sure that the ANSPs invest and that the airlines also have a good reason to invest on their side? I think there's a big hen and egg problem. Yeah, so the ANSPs see not very many aircraft have it, so is it worthwhile to bring it? And the airlines then think, why should I invest if the ANSPs don't support it? So we need a framework that makes the ANSPs invest, and the airlines need to have the incentive to do it. And for example, something like best equipped, best served would be a perfect way of making sure I reduce my delays by investing, and then I can fly more punctual than other airlines. Very great incentive to go that direction, and I think that's what we need.
Thank you very much, Veronique. So we are focusing today on ATM, but somebody asked if you could say 2 words about where we are with the development of hydrogen-powered aircraft, but brief if you would. But in terms of solutions deployed, solutions in the pipeline, can you highlight some very practical examples?
Yeah, I will start by commenting on Dorothea, because I think, Dorothea, you're fully right. And we are very often hitting the limitation of the speed of change. And this is something we have to be really conscious of all together, because there are so many actors that it's very important, all of us, to be aligned on our objectives and vision. And thank you, SESAR, to join us into that direction. From an Airbus perspective on what we have implemented already, I would like to quote the digitalization and the capacity of our aircraft to transmit the FMS trajectories to the ground through the ATM function 6. And also we've gone beyond with the capability of the ground to talk as well to our aircraft. And I think this is a very important piece in our ability to communicate and to ensure that we avoid all the unnecessary buffers that we have already in the system. And I will finish by your question, which is a bit out of scope, around hydrogen. Airbus is committed to the hydrogen because we believe it's a potential source for the long term for our aircraft. We are working, we are exploring on the technology, and this is something that still is only on our horizon, because this is, in the end, an electric aircraft and has all the advantage on the decarbonisation.
Thank you very much. Complete the picture for us, Tanya, in terms of the use of what we already have and what you see as most exciting coming down the track.
Well, coming down, I would go back to TBO, trajectory-based operations. We're leading that project, and we really see a lot of potential in it. It is true that sometimes it takes longer, and it surely takes a huge effort of coordination. So one of the ideas that we really defend is that early movers should be supported, so that we create the right incentives that all move on as early as possible, so that we can really see the results, because that is really the gap that is being addressed here. And also from our side, we think that it is really important to ensure that we have all the smooth passes in terms of, for instance, not only the innovation, but also we have facilities for the simulation part that can ensure validation for some of the projects. Just mentioning another one, talking on CO2, I don't know if we're going to go back to non-CO2, but I think it's very interesting, for instance, just one project, which is the geese one. It's really inspiring if we can, all the cooperation that we have with the ANSPs, with NATS, to ensure that we really ensure these formation flights, as also contributing to saving fuel. So all these projects together put in the master plan and coordinated will really bring a result if we have the right incentives.
And just on that point about non-CO2, someone asking here, and actually asking it in relation to pairwise, but I think more broadly, the question was, is it an environmental support project or an alternative to land more aircraft in the congested system? It's both. They're both, aren't they? These are solutions to both problems.
Absolutely. It is for resilience purposes, it's for capacity purposes, and it's for sustainability purposes.
Thank you. Tanya, can I come back to you on this question of ambition? Because we've got, just to say, I can't get into detailed questions about sustainable aviation fuel or hydrogen-powered aircraft, because we are focusing today on what SESAR does. But I wanted to put in the context, because a number of questions asking, globally, says someone, we predict 10% growth, traffic growth every 3 years. The efficiency gains are projected of 6%, which will result in more CO2 emissions in absolute numbers. Is it enough? So there's quite a lot of people saying, and I mentioned sustainable aviation fuels, because some people saying here, come to Tanya, then I'll come to you, Dorothea. Well, is it you said it was the low-hanging fruit, which is why I wanted to come to you. Why do you think ATM is so central, and do we need to be more ambitious? Tanya, and then Dorothea.
I think the level of ambition is correct, and it's more important, it's based on data. This is really where we should focus, not to have, well, maybe we could have a potential huge ambition, but if we don't base it on data, and that's why our forecast, our 7-year forecast, our long-term forecast, they are really feeding in the master plan. We have a very good partnership with SESAR, because we also have this data part, and together with innovation. So I think the level of ambition that we have in the master plan is adequate. We should really work to coordinate and make it happen. All the 10 SDOs, we should really work to make sure that they will end up deployed, operational, well, validated and operational, and we can see the effects. So I would not change the level of ambition. It's true that scalability is going to be a challenge. That's why I would say that we need to program, plan, and work together.
I want to come back on that in a while, but Dorothea, you wanted to react to that question as well.
Yeah, the ambition can only be as big as the waste in the system is. So, I mean, you referred to the holding patterns that we need to get out, or any trajectories that deviate from the optimal route. That is what ATM can do, and that's what we absolutely should do. But it's of course not the only thing, and it's of course not self-sufficient and the only thing the industry can do. And Veronique, you've shown all the examples we need to do. So it is investing in new aircraft, it is using sustainable aviation fuels or other means to take the CO2 out of the air. So it's of course not the only way to make the industry sustainable, but it's a very important one, and as it was said a few times, a low-hanging fruit. It doesn't sound like a low-hanging fruit because there's so many actors that need to be coordinated, so I actually don't think it's quite so low-hanging, but let's make sure that we work on it and get as much as we can. 6% is huge in a hard-to-abate industry.
And I think we would all be happy if the ambition is not good enough and we need to revise it. The point, as you said, to prepare the future, we have to work now. So let's sure that we can go on that route. And then, if we believe that we can do better, let's do it.
Catherine?
I firmly believe that, I come back to what's outside this door here. If we can get even half of what's out there into live operations, that will have a massive impact. We talked about the Geese project that we're in collaboration with. We're in the phase of creating the concept of operations over the North Atlantic. It is things like that that we can do here and now that will make the difference and get us on that pathway. 6% might not sound like a lot, but the ambition is huge. We have to play our part, however big or however small. I'd like to come back to, from my point of view, one of our biggest challenges in the UK is airspace modernisation. And whilst not a SESAR project, we have to deliver that in the UK. We're currently operating in 1950s airspace with, the point about airlines are now equipping their aircraft with, the equipage to deal with PBN and trajectory operations, and we have an airspace that isn't set up to fully handle that. So we are working very closely with the Civil Aviation Authority and the Department for Transport in order to deliver that project.
Thank you. Arno?
Yeah, 6% may seem ambitious, but when you put that in comparison with the growth expected in a number of flights, 2 to 3% per year in the next 25 years, then you understand immediately that this will not solve the problem entirely. To me, maybe it's the first step, and in a longer term we'll have to find other ways. But as already mentioned by Dorothea, it's only one part of the actions that we need to take, and SAF and new aircraft and so on must also contribute a significant part to the targets of reducing CO2 emissions. That's the only way we can do it. So 60% for me, I would say it may be not a low-hanging fruit, but at least it sounds obvious that this should be tackled ASAP. And the question, at least from my side, is 20 years ambitious enough?
Thank you very much indeed. And we're going to come back on this issue of how ATM fits into the bigger picture of the aviation industry, its competitiveness, and so on, in a conversation I'm going to have later about the Destination 2050 report that many of you will be familiar with. One very specific question, and it links to the trajectories discussion. Can you imagine air traffic flying more sporty, is the word that's used, trajectories, i.e. tighter approach departure manoeuvres, which are the power-intensive phases of every flight? Who can pick up on that? Arno?
Well, it's probably Heron as well. It's okay, you have a steeper approach, more sporty maybe, depending on how adventurous you are. But again, it's something which, Dorothea was very right, we need to accelerate this. We take a lot of time testing, and of course aviation, safety is paramount in aviation, but is there a way to really accelerate these projects? Because it's obvious that the benefits are there. We have been testing green landing at this airport for many, many years in various projects, but how can we ensure that the deployment is accelerated? So through incentives or through regulations up to the deciding bodies, but we have tools. How do we deploy them faster than what we do today?
Let's focus on that deployment question in the remainder of our discussion. And somebody here saying, best equipped, best served is mentioned for decades as a way to boost deployment, but barely deployed. Why? How do we change this? You've all highlighted this as the biggest issue in terms of accelerating. We keep talking about the need to speed up, to accelerate. Just to come back and get a little bit more of a sense, and perhaps Tanya, from your perspective, what for you talked about it and I sort of stopped you a bit because I wanted to focus on it now. What for you is the key to accelerating the deployment of the solutions we already have and making sure that we're ready to absorb and take up those solutions that are in the pipeline now? Where do we need to focus, do you think? It's the $64 million question always.
Well, it's difficult to say it in one word, but if I would have to choose one word, I would choose coordination. Coordination is key, and I think that is being done already. with the master plan, with SGU, with SDM. So I think working with Eurocontrol also as a partner, so working together, if I had to choose one priority, that would be the one. And I think in the past, there might have been issues concerning coordination. I think there is a lot of alignment now, and this new version of the master plan really ensured that. So I think this is a positive message. If I would choose another one, I would probably talk about incentives, of course. Incentives are key. We should not forget that. So it's really important that for the future, and there were already references here to the MFF, that we take into account that incentives matter in terms of innovation and in terms of deployment. And on that, I would may also add that, again, rewarding first movers, because they at first don't have the right incentives to do so, because they don't see the immediate results of their investment, is really important and is an efficient way to look at the incentivizing deployment. So I would choose those two ideas.
Arno, coming back to you, in terms of the incentives, that framework and incentives that really encourage that investment, what for you are the sort of incentives that are going to work most effectively, do you think?
Well, I think that I can think of two. One is, of course, the prioritization. When airlines are using the most efficient techniques would be given priority at the airport. That would be an obvious one. Also on the ATM system as a whole. Financial incentive is always important in the end because it costs a lot of money to the whole system. So why don't we make it more financially interesting for instance, airlines to adopt those technologies? So that these kind of things needs to be addressed. But again, ideally it should be addressed at the European level, because it would be very difficult to do it on a national level. It would introduce a lot of bias in the system, and I could think about a European-wide system, saying, okay, let's take this as part of this program, these projects of improving, ATM overall. Incentives on one hand, prioritization on the other hand, knowing that you will be better and faster served in the single European sky if you apply those technologies. I think that would make a lot of sense to me.
Veronique, you wanted to jump in?
Yes, I will add 2 points. And the first one, it will be with precaution, because sometimes one of the incentives that we can have is purely mandates. But then we have to be careful, because mandates, when they are too prescriptive and done too quickly, can be counterproductive, or maybe we do not have the right mandates. But sometimes mandates are good as a wake-up call for us all to get aligned on the same objective. And the second point that I wanted to address, and this is part of what I called earlier the limitation in the speed of change, this is the human factor. Yeah. Because in the end, collectively, all of us, all the actors, we have to ensure that all the tools, the processes, the products that we are going to define, in the end, can be safely operated with the human at the heart of it. So there is a limitation there as well.
Thank you, and I want to come back to that later on. We're going to talk to an air traffic controller. Catherine, you talked also about pace. You said, been talking about this for an awfully long time. What is the key now to accelerating deployment? And Dorothea, then I'll come to you.
So for me, it's bringing our regulators along on the journey. And I'm not blaming the regulators. I know my regulator is in the room today, but we are excruciatingly slow from an air traffic point of view in comparison to the pace at which the industry has had to move in the sectors such as aviation security, because the threat has changed so quickly, as well as in the equipage of aircraft, because the evolution of the aircraft has increased so much. But air traffic control is inherently safe with huge amount of resilience built into the system, and therefore any change to that makes people very nervous. So we've got to overcome the pace at which we understand the safety implications of change in our industry, and we need to do that with all of the brains in this room, we probably need the help of people from other industries who are really good at implementing new technology and are happy to fast fail in a safe environment. So for me, it's about us all working together and making sure that we get under the nub of the safety arguments, because that is a massive impeder for what we are actually trying to do.
And Dorothea, you talked right at the beginning in answer to my first question about the importance of those incentives and the framework for investment. Someone in our audience says, aren't the benefits of a solution a sufficient incentive? Maybe there are solutions that require incentives and others that do not. Do we need to be very targeted about where we're putting those incentives? And what for you is the key to get that scalability that you've emphasised is so important?
Yeah, I think indeed the result of the project should be delivering an incentive. But it's again this question of if one airline does it and 10 don't, so then you probably don't materialize the benefit unless there's really this best equipped, better served, which, as we already heard, also doesn't really apply much. So the question is, why can't we get this into work? Because that would definitely help. If I am following a TBO, why can't I then be treated differently to somebody who doesn't use it? And I mean, if we think about summer operations, delays are a huge topic for everybody in the industry. So any airline that has a means to reduce its delays by complying better with new technology has a huge incentive of doing so. So it doesn't always have to be a financial incentive. It would be the incentive of getting the benefit from the investment. And that would be very much done by this, better serving.
Please, Catherine.
Eurocontrol are currently running the summer 2025 preparedness for what will be, I think, another challenging summer. And there's a number of initiatives that are out there. And even if we worked to delivering half of those initiatives this summer, so things like flying the filed flight plan, then we could at least assess the contribution that makes to the available capacity, what it does for our current emissions, and also it will determine how good we are in challenging operational days such as bad weather days.
Veronique.
I think for me in this discussion we are reaching the point where we are addressing value. And what we have to do collectively, once again, this is about ensuring that our solutions produce value and that we are prioritizing collectively the ones that will bring the most value. And value can be on many fronts. It can be to address our sustainability, CO2, non-CO2. It can be also economics. When we agree on it, it's just a question of value, agreeing together that we can invest, because in the end it's back to investment for the good of us all in this industry.
Thank you very much indeed. There's one more specific question here. How do we fully sync developments on the ground, airborne space segment solutions to ensure that deployment benefits can be realised and everyone can deploy? So that holistic approach, that key, Arno, from an airport perspective, how do you see that challenge?
Well, it is a big challenge because there are lots of stakeholders at every airport and across the network in Europe. But what we see in the number of projects where we are participating, like we're talking Heron, we have Brussels Airlines, we have Skies, and in all these projects, it's always multi-stakeholders, and that's the only way to make it happen. The problems are just too big to rely on one party, whether it's the airport, airline, or ATC. We need to ensure a collaborative model. A number of steps have already been taken, and I think that when I think about, I've been CEO for 15 years, where we were 15 years ago, we've done already a lot of good work in terms of increasing collaboration between all stakeholders, but it's the only way this can work. Put airlines, ATC, airport together, make it happen. Because also don't forget, if you increase predictability, if you increase efficiency of the operations, it's very important because there's scarcity of capacity also at the airports. When you look forward, we will, as an airport industry, have to invest a lot in new capacity. which may not be optimal because we could still optimize the current capacity at a lower cost for all the stakeholders. So I think that's very important. The multi-stakeholder approach is the only way forward.
Dorothea and then Catherine.
Yeah, once again about this pace at which we adopt change. So I understand and I fully endorse it's a super safety critical industry, no doubt about that. But can't we all learn faster? And I think we could. So if more people were part of trials, if more of the stakeholders needed to try out one of the things rather than just a few frontrunners, yeah, I think that would make the whole industry adopt it faster because everybody understands the benefits faster, and then we get moving faster. So I think some of the security or safety concerns are very much centered around, let's wait, yeah? And if we make more people learn, if we learn faster, I think we can also have a much faster adoption.
And we haven't talked about the role of big demonstrator projects in all of this, for example. But Catherine, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thinking about how our industry is set up and some of the challenges that we face. We are set up and we are incentivized as ANSPs on delay targets that are all based on departure performance and flight performance, whereas as an ANSP and probably as an airport, arrive on time is as important, in fact, more important than depart on time. Now, I know departure on time is what the passengers want. So if we can overcome some of these challenges and start talking in the same language from an airline, an ANSP and an airport point of view, then we should be able to come together. I am in the process of trying to get my teams to talk about punctuality as opposed to delay minutes because it doesn't capture cancellations where we have had challenges in the network. So if we can come together and re-baseline as an industry, I think that would really help in all of the ATM challenges we're facing.
Just a couple of questions. Sorry, Arno, you want to come in?
Maybe just adding a comment about incentives because it's maybe a bit cynical what I'm going to say, but money talks. And in the end, what we've seen here at the airport, we've introduced 10 years ago a differentiation in our airport charges. Okay, it's not ATC, it's not ATM, but it's airport charges. At the time in 2015, a modern aircraft would pay 3 times less than an old aircraft, emitting a lot of CO2 and noises and so on. Times 3 in 2015, we changed that to times 20 in 2023. And what we see is this does work at some point. It's an incentive for airlines to come with modern aircraft. They pay less, and the airlines coming with old aircraft pay a lot more. And I can tell you, times 20 it's a big impact if you fly every day of the year with old aircraft. And I'm just using a comparison here. Say, why can't we have such a system somewhere in the ATM system? Say we really give incentives. We have bonus malus system, if you want, just to accelerate the take-up rate by all the airlines in Europe, because that's the only way we could, in my view, make a fast change. I think we need to accelerate the change, and we need to get all the players in the same direction quickly.
Thank you very much indeed. Dorothea, a couple of very specific questions about airline routes, which I'd like to pick up with you, and then let's try and identify the way forward. Someone asking, is the route flown always the most environmentally friendly available? If not, how can we improve its uptake? And someone else saying, airlines want the flexibility to not fly the filed flight plan for their sustainability and fuel-saving initiatives. How is that managed?
Well, I think we very often fly the not so sustainable routes, but not because we want to, but because we have to, because we're way too often at the wrong flight level to be handed over to the next airspace, because it's a very scattered, very fragmented airspace that we still have in Europe. So I think it is very hard for an airline to fly in the best sustainable way. And the topic of should we still change flight routes to be more sustainable? Of course, I know how often our pilots request to have the more direct way wherever that is possible. But if we ever got to TBO, we could request that from the beginning. It could be planned like that from the beginning, so it wouldn't need to be changed later. And if I change something in my flight, it has an impact on the next aircraft flying to that airport. So I think we need to really optimize it from the meta view and not just from each and every flight perspective. And of course, I would encourage my pilots to look for the most sustainable flight path. But I think we can do overall better if we get to a from the beginning optimized path.
Thank you very much. I want very brief, if you would, Catherine, because we need to try and draw some conclusions.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention the Seconia project. So obviously, we are working on that project to identify the avoidance of contrails, where we believe that actually a slightly higher fuel burn is possibly more environmentally friendly than having the contrails at all. It's obviously early science, but we need to look at the non-CO2 impacts too.
Thank you very much. Really brief.
Yes, I just wanted to complement what Catherine is saying. I was going to talk also of Seconia, because the non-CO2 effect and avoid the ice supersaturated regions in high altitude. It's 10% of our flights contribute to 80% of the contrails. So how can we avoid that? And there's another aspect also, which is maybe less severe in Europe's sky. This is avoiding the clean air turbulence. So there are many reasons why we need to be flexible in ATM for CO2, non-CO2.
And take account of all these trade-offs in these decisions. We are almost out of time, but I want to put you on the spot because I want to come back. The Commissioner said that the master plan marks the beginning of a new era. And he quoted Mahatma Gandhi saying, the future depends on what you do today. So for each of you, if you had to identify a key next step, a priority, in terms of implementing the master plan, we touched on a whole range of issues today. What is the most important to realise the full potential of ATM, whether you think 6% is wildly ambitious or not ambitious enough, but that full potential, your key priority or key next step, half a minute each. Veronique first.
So for me, this is all that we have started doing and that we will keep going around the data link between our aircraft and the rest of the ATM world, be it with the airlines, be it with the airport, be it with the service providers. Our aircraft need to be able to send data and to receive data in a full, secure, robust and integrity way.
Thank you. Catherine.
So Veronique is absolutely right. I would say data sharing in the first instance is vitally important. And then the second and third priority for me is airspace modernisation and the continued implementation of free route airspace.
Thank you very much. Arno?
Yeah, AOP as an obvious one, but also a project like Heron or Peacock, we don't need to talk about that, but improving predictability, improving understanding of the impact on the environment of the different flight operations is essential.
Thank you. Tanya?
I would not pick one. I'm sorry.
You no. In half a minute, you pick as many as you want.
Someone has to ruin all your programming. No, really, what I would ensure is that all the 10 STOs will be worked upon with the right prioritization so that we deliver them all and that we have the right capacity on the whole value chain, all of us. We are working and we are really committed to that. Since the innovation part, we're really going to Saclay, so a new innovation hub so that everybody can come in the future. Until then is really putting these priorities in the master plan. All of them prioritized, but in place. Not one, not two, not three.
So your key priority would be a holistic approach that coordinates all these efforts together.
Not letting anything fall behind, even though, of course, we cannot do everything at the same time. So we should really pick together in a really co-decision what we should pick first. So these are good ideas, but not let the others just be put aside.
And we will come back on that issue later on. Dorothea, you have the last word.
Thank you. So in order to achieve what you said, I think we need a reasonably funded deployment framework. I think that is super important, together with incentives that makes people adopt it fast.
On that note, will you join me in thanking our panel very much indeed for a great conversation? You may return. Thank you so much.